Hi everyone. Hi. Hello, and wow, whew, that's kind of loud, but you can hear me, so that's the important part. Hi, Tenzin. Welcome to the Center for Women's Studies and LGBTQ Initiatives. If this is your first time in the center, oh my gosh, hello, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. If you're a returner, thank you for coming back even after meeting me. Thank you for laughing. Thank you. My name is Odette Maria Rodriguez. If you don't know, I'm the program coordinator at the Center for Women's Studies. So before we get started, I have some things I'd like to say. First and foremost, we would like to acknowledge with respect the Oneida people, the first inhabitants of the land on which Colgate University is located, as part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. All right, I have one event announcement. Tomorrow at 4:30 in Golden, it will be Black Visibility Then and Now, the Prayer Pilgrimage for Freedom. Picker Art Gallery and the Department of Art and Art History are bringing a guest lecturer, Latanya S. Autry. She'll discuss images from the new exhibition they have coming up, Let Us March On, the Prayer Pilgrimage for Freedom. So that's opening up at Picker, so the lecture is tomorrow. It's going to be really great. During the presentation and in the Q&A, please remember to use the microphones to ensure accessibility so everyone can hear your questions and everyone can hear the answers and we all have a wonderful learning experience. Remember to clean up around you and please discard your trash in the trash cans. We have recycling as well. The green bin is for like water bottles and things like that. We collect those, we turn them in for the 5 cents we get per bottle, and we donate it to a local place in the area. So yes, and I want to say a big thank you to Africana and Latin American Studies and the Arnold A. Sayo Chair in Diversity and Community for helping to bring this event together today. The introduction today is going to be done by our one and only Kara. So thank you from me, and alrighty, here we go.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce to you all Zahira Kelly Cabrera, aka Bad Dominicana, who is an Afro-Dominicana mommy, writer, artist, mujerista, award-winning sociocultural critic, and international speaker. Known for advocating for Latinx visibility and rights on social media and unfiltered social critique broken down in accessible language. Born in New York City and raised between Puerto Plata, the Dominican Republic, and the Bronx by her mother, who is a creative Renaissance woman. The international trending hashtags, Maybe He Doesn't Hit You, and its Spanish language version, Quizá No Te Pegue, on how gendered non-physical abuse manifests in daily life were also authored by her. They lent a voice to tens of thousands of women sharing their stories and experiences with abuse across Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. In her writing, dynamic use of social media, and at speaking events, she employs indigenous-style storytelling, no-holds-barred analysis of abuse culture, colonialism, social power dynamics, and a critique of media and pop culture. She aims to pick apart white supremacist, capitalist heteropatriarchy from an anti-colonial Afro-Latina perspective. Her visual art is dedicated to highlighting Afro-Latina and women of color's beauty, and is very much tied to her writing. It has been exhibited at the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston, among other galleries and publications. She traverses many mediums: watercolor, photography, pencil illustrations, oils, acrylics, animation, digital painting, and often mixes them together. In her images, she re-examines her bicultural upbringing, indigenous displacement, and neo-colonial marginalized womanhood, as well as concepts of fragility historically denied to lower-class women of Afro descent. In her retro pinup-inspired art style, she materializes women rendered invisible by an era and society that only prized middle to upper-class white womanhood and beauty as a paragon of femininity. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Zahira Kelly.
Hi, thank you so much for coming through, for having me. Okay, usually before I start talks, I just ask people to have an open mind because I am a Black Latin American person, and basically, 99.999% of people's conception of humanity does not include me whatsoever. That means like your conception of the universe as it is needs to be broken the fuck down and built back up the way that it should be. So to begin, when I say anti-blackness as like Latin American nationalism, I guess we have to begin all the way from the beginning. In the history, if you've ever learned about Latin America, and mind you, I'm an Afro-Latina. I went to school in both the United States and in the Dominican Republic, which is Latin America. But in neither of those countries did I ever learn anything whatsoever about myself or people like me. So that means that the curriculums do not include me. When I go to the library, I am not there. When I turn on the television, I am not there either. I basically do not exist in anyone's imagination. And when I first started blogging, which is the only reason I'm here, honestly, because I wouldn't have access to these spaces either, I just asked, if I don't even exist in anyone's imagination, do I even exist? It's kind of like I'm a hologram in a sense. So, to begin, first we got to break down our conceptions of like, what is the discovery of America? Because people act like he landed in Massachusetts on Plymouth Rock. The guy landed in the Caribbean. Okay, that's where America was discovered. I think he landed in the Bahamas or something. But the first colony was where my grandfather's from, the Dominican Republic, La Isabela. The first colony in the Americas. It's also the site of the first indigenous massacres. It's the site of the first slave ships that arrived to the Americas. So that is how I exist, basically. In 1492, colonizers came to the Caribbean. I just want to keep emphasizing that because he did not go to Massachusetts. They couldn't get the natives to do the work that they wanted, so they started importing Black people forcibly on slave ships over to the West Indies. And by the way, they were inspired to do slavery in that way by actually Arabs in the Middle East who were enslaving Africans, which inspired Europeans in like Spain and Portugal. And then when they started colonizing, they were like, hey, let's just bring them over to the Americas, So I actually descend from Black people who were slaves in Portugal, like for hundreds of years before 1492. So that's how long the legacy goes back. And just to tie that into it, I'm the first generation to not be scrubbing richer, whiter people's floors and toilets for a living. It's 2018. I'm the first generation. And we're talking about hundreds of years before 1492, we were already slaves. Okay. So, when they couldn't do that, they brought over Africans. Eventually, they went to the rest of Latin America. And North America was actually the last stop in the Americas. Not the first one. So even when we talk about Columbus Day and the discovery of America, it makes no sense for it to be North American centric whatsoever, actually. So, endpoint is every single Latin American country got African slaves. Now, the common conception is that African slaves somehow only came to North America or something like that. The majority actually landed south of the border. North America only got like 10% of the slaves that were brought to the Americas. The other 90% landed everywhere else in the Americas. That means that there's tons of denial as to our existence and what the history of Latin America really looks like. In reality, Latin American culture in itself is sort of a mishmash of indigenous, European, African, and also Asian people who came through, and like a lot of people, like I have Chinese ancestry as well, because Chinese people went to the Dominican Republic, surprise. They're all over the West Indies. There's Asian people all over Latin America. But mainly, way that Latin American history is told is like there was just colonizers and there were native people, and now there are mestizos who are like mixed native and white people who were like the majority of Latin Americans. And that's kind of where people leave it at. But what ends up happening is there's just like a general invisibility and erasure of pretty much Black people all over Latin America. That means that when people say Latin American pride or brown pride, I've grown to be suspicious because they mean not you Black people, basically. They're not talking about Afro-Latinos when they talk about brown pride or unity or any of that stuff. In fact, the reason that I say that not that I say, but that anti-Blackness is sort of the glue that holds Latin America together is as soon as you bring up the issue of Blackness, people act like it's going to fall apart. Like you cannot have brown and Latin American unity if you have to also assess where the Black people are and what you've been doing to them. And that's reflected everywhere, basically. Womanhood in Latin America is very hierarchical. Like it's not just divided by class, it's also divided by race, by phenotype. That means that we have a bunch of different colored people in our families and we're treated differently according to what we look like. Because as opposed to the myth that supposedly racial mixing is a new thing, hello, we've been doing that in Latin America literally since 1492. All of Latin America, for the most part, is a bunch of mixed people. That's not a new concept. All that happens is people continue to come out different colors, and they continue to be treated differently for what they look like. We're not all going to turn beige. Like, I'm sorry, this is like a fantasy, but that's also an anti-Black fantasy, because think about it. The only reason that you're going to stop being racist is because the races that you don't like cease to exist. You mix them away, like, and basically that goes into Latin America's issues with anti-Blackness. Just about every Latin American country has literally had what we call a blanqueamiento, and it's been government sanctioned, which is basically whitening. What that means is that they've purposely brought in white settlers and migrants from elsewhere to whiten the populace. While this is being done, indigenous people are being suppressed and oppressed. If you look at Argentina, like the police are like burning down Indian villages, pretty much. If you turn on the television, you're not going to see native people, indigenous people on Latin American television. You're going to turn it on, you're going to think it's fucking Sweden. Even mestizos who are a little bit too dark, I'm sorry, you don't have a place in the museum. Too bad for you. Like, it's extremely racist and colorist in general, but it reflects what society looks like in Latin America, and what that means is the upper classes, just like in the United States, have tendency to be white. They are either of European descent, or they're like directly, like they came from Europe a couple generations ago, or they're actually descendants of colonizers. There are mestizos up there too, but they have a tendency to be light-skinned and yada yada. You're not really going to be seeing a bunch of indigenous people in the upper classes. You're not going to be seeing Black people at all. Black people in Latin America are still the people who are the most marginalized and have the least access to resources, the least access to education, the least access to jobs, pretty much. You know, we can continue along those lines. The highest rates of murder, the highest rates of violence. So we have countries like Mexico, who I think it was 3 years ago finally acknowledged Black people. And over 1 million people identified as Black on the census. We can pretty much bet that there's way more people who probably didn't identify as Black just because it's so taboo and shamed upon to be Black in Latin America, basically. I come from the Dominican Republic, which is a majority Black place, and I mean everybody knows it for being very anti-Black, very self-hating. So what happens in Latin America is that blackness is very central to the culture, to be honest, in every which way that you can really think about what culture means. When we talk about language, when we talk about food, when we talk about music, traditions, spirituality, pretty much every single Latin American country is heavily tinged with blackness, even though we don't quantify that blackness. All of the popular genres of music are extremely black, even though they have white faces now. They might give it different names, like for example, like the whole urbana, urban music is now like a bunch of like white Colombians or something, but that's actually reggaeton. That was created by black Panamanians and pretty much fronted by black Dominicans and black Puerto Ricans. And it was really ratchet and ghetto and nasty and for criminals and yada yada until whiter people took it up. Does that sound familiar to how hip hop is treated and how blackness is treated in the United States? So when we talk about cultural appropriation, we don't really think about the dynamics within Latin America and the concept of like basically non-black Latin Americans taking over all the genres and culture that is basically created by black people. They are the ones who profit from it. They are the faces of it. And then black people just get left behind again. To where you can't even name me a single black Latina artist anywhere, even though everyone is doing these genres. So now, you know, when we talk about the reggaeton, the perreo princesses and whatever, yada yada, are all non-Caribbean white Latinas. And I'm just like, you can't even be Caribbean at this point because we're the ones who created those genres. But Caribbean people are still considered too vulgar because we're too associated with blackness. And that includes even if you're not necessarily black. Like Puerto Rico does have black people and Afro descendants. And maybe most don't necessarily look black, but these mere association with blackness means that that's still like faux pas, basically. We'll have artists like, say, I purposely forget his name because I don't like him. What's the dudes in the Cardi song? I like it. There's Bad Bunny and the other one I don't like. J Balvin. Okay, so J Balvin is like a white guy who dresses in urban wear. I have no idea why he's not from that. And he tries to rap with a Puerto Rican accent. Because rapping with a Puerto Rican accent is cool, but actually having a Puerto Rican accent is very bad and supposedly ghetto and ratchet because it's too black. Same with Dominican Spanish. That's happened pretty much across all genres. It's not just reggaeton, it's like salsa. Who is the face of salsa? It's some white people. Salsa is super black. Cumbia, even mariachi. Mexican mariachi is of black origins. You can go to Colombia or DR and hear stuff that sounds like fucking mariachi because black people created it. But you're not gonna see black faces in any of it, basically. Even tango, Argentina prides itself as the whitest country in Latin America or whatever. But even tango was created in poor black clubs in Argentina, you know, by the black people who they say aren't there. And now tango, you think about it and you think white people like doing weird dances across the floor. But really, I mean, what's happened is everything's kind of been whitewashed and it continues that way. Like I was recently in Colombia, in Cali, and I was honestly shocked because the image of Colombia is so white. I went to Cali and half of the people on the street were dark-skinned black people. And when I went to the restaurants, once I learned what the Black Pacific Coast cuisine was, it turns out all of the restaurants serve basically black food and call it the national cuisine, even though they ignore that black people exist the rest of the time. The national music, the traditions, just everything that is considered like a national folklore and stuff to be proud of often comes from black people. But you are not proud of black people in Latin America. Like, that's just kind of how it works. And bringing that up in Latin American circles is like, basically, supposedly the source of division. Being anti-black is not divisive, apparently, but just saying like maybe you shouldn't be anti-black is absolutely divisive and going to ruin your country or something like that, because like Latin Americans just view Latin America as like only being whole if the black people are not human or something. Unfortunately, that also means that in terms of just, it's not just accepting that there are black people, but it's just the humanity is not there. So there's like performative support of blackness. So we'll see a lot of non-black Latin Americans who will be like, Black Lives Matter. But if you ask them about the Black lives in their own country, it's like crickets, and suddenly they're all up in arms about denial and claiming that, you know, they have no privilege over black people, or even that they experience colorism for being light or white or something like that. There's a lot of issues with Latin Americans grappling with the concepts of you can be oppressed here and have issues with immigration and all of this other stuff and xenophobia and yada yada, but you still have structural power over the black people who are from your own country. Like those things coexist, basically. Like, you know, being oppressed in one way doesn't mean that, you know, you're not still an oppressor in another. And like people have issues grappling with that. You know, when we talk about anti-blackness in Latin America, people are like, let's focus on immigration. I'm like, we're also immigrants. It's like, how do you think I ended up here? If anything, anti-blackness is so stark that when we talk about immigration issues, we erase the blackness when black people are actually most of the people who are detained and deported. So if you talk about immigration and you're not mentioning the people who are most likely to be detained and deported, what exactly are you talking about? Are you talking about immigration, or are you just being fucking racist? And it's just like people don't really process any of these things and don't even bother to find out. And when you do point them out, then they're angry because people like to stay to whatever they were raised to believe or whatever. And it's like Latin America is not without its issues. You know, we like to come here and say like we don't have any of that in our country, but you have to ask like who is saying this. Because if you're a non-black person who never experienced racism until you left your country, then you're privileged. Because I experienced racism in Latin America and pretty much any country I step foot into because I'm black. I don't have a home in my home. I don't get to belong in Latin America, and I don't get to belong when I'm here either. I'm placeless, basically. So if you go to Latin America as a non-black person, as a non-black Latin American, and you actually belong there and you don't face racism, then those are things that you have to actually grapple with and think about, and that's why. And when you look around at universities and the majority are non-black Latin Americans, just know that that's not coincidental. We literally have less access to immigrate. We have less access to education. We have less access to resources. So it's never a coincidence that you're not going to see black people here. I mean, studies at this point rate that like 1 in 4 Latin Americans is like black. 1 in 4 Latin Americans being black is not a thing that would ever exist in the media or in colleges or anywhere else, precisely because of the anti-blackness. So my situation as an Afro-Latina is mostly one of just unbelonging, because in Latin America there is no space for black Latinas whatsoever. And in the United States, there is none either, because we don't fit into the proper black schematic, and we don't fit into the proper Latin American schematic. That means that I pretty much experienced alienation on all fronts. And as far as what I was saying earlier about womanhood being hierarchical, in Latin America, just all women are not treated the same. There's a lot of not just class, but also race issues. So that means that when we talk about gendered expectations, we have to talk about also racialized expectations. We have to think about who is going to be expected to be the maid. Is it going to be the upper class white girls? Is it going to be the upper class like mestizas? Is it going to be the lower class ones? And how come all the maids, the only black people you see in Latin America television are a black maid, occasionally in the background? So it's like a case where people come here and complain about how they're stereotyped as maids, as non-black Latinos, but in Latin America, it's black people and indigenous women who are stereotyped as the maids. And for me, what that treatment ends up looking like is basically, I'm subhuman, you know, I'm hypersexualized for being black because the only other images that you see of Afro-Latinas is when they're half naked in Carnival at Brazil, or in Brazil or something. That means that I get a lot of really inappropriate propositions from non-black Latin American men, because there is a history of basically using us as kind of like a side mistress that you hide, but your proper wife is whiter and more socially acceptable. My country, the Dominican Republic, is actually a sex tourism hub precisely because of that. So men from all over the world, and that includes Latin America and pretty much everywhere else, go to the Dominican Republic for like black fetish sex, basically. And it's like exploitative because they also go because they don't have to pay the same prices that they pay elsewhere. But that follows me everywhere to where I know a bunch of, specifically when you're Dominican, a black Dominican woman. I know a bunch of non-Latina black women who have been around Latin American circles and like have been, people have made propositions to them under the assumption that they're Dominican. So to be assumed Dominican is to be assumed a sex worker. By the way, I'm pro-sex worker. The problem is that when you treat sex workers like trash and you peg me as a sex worker just because I'm breathing, you also treat me like trash. So that's absolutely an issue as well with Black Americans. It's such the case that they'll say we don't exist, but there was one time I was just looking up certain things on Latin American forums, and I can find pages and pages of them describing supposed magical stuff that we do with our genitals as Black Latinas. But for anything else, they don't remember that we exist. And that's absolutely tied to slavery and the way that we were basically not just chattel as like, you know, domestic whatever, but like we were there to be bred, forcibly bred for other people. You know, and like in 2018, that continues to be a legacy that follows me everywhere that I go. It's to where a lot of Dominican women, like say if they're traveling the Europe, won't even say that they're Dominican just to avoid the whole like potential sex worker, you know, propositions and inappropriate groping and whatever the hell. Like people take extra liberties when you're us, basically. And it's not just that, it's just like general subhumanity. Like when I was living in Miami Beach, I lived among mainly white Latinos, and it would be like a daily thing where I just thought a lot about what chivalry actually means, you know, because we're always complaining because that's not feminist or something. But at this point, I'm really wondering who that's for because it's never been for me, because I would experience stuff like white Latino men who would hold the door open for a white Latina who was going to pass by. And then when I was going to pass by, they would slam it in my face. Because I'm not a lady. I'm not a woman. I'm not the kind that you take care of. And basically, when you look at a novela and the women being wooed are always like blanquitas or like light mestizas, they're never black. That really reflects how people feel in general. That is who care is reserved for. That is who chivalry and wooing and romance is reserved for. That's who providing is reserved for. So, yeah, I would liken it to when we think about American films like Gone with the Wind, which are basically a spoiled white girl. It's like a spoiled white girl who owns a slave, at least one that we see. And you know, the whole thing is about her and her problems, and like we never think about like there's a black woman there who's her house slave. And what does womanhood look like for her? Like Scarlett has these expensive ass dresses. Everyone's treating her like a delicate fainting flower, yada yada. But it's like, does her mammy slave get to be a delicate fainting flower? My experiences have basically made me think a lot about womanhood and this whole concept of femininity and being delicate and fragile. And is it actually a bad thing? And is it only bad because it's only allotted to certain women? Because the fact of the matter is, would slavery have even happened if you had considered black women to have been delicate and fragile and fainting flowers? Like, it would not have been possible. Literally, the whole thing is built on us not being human, on us being more like a she-beast who doesn't really feel, who's here for labor, we're here for your gratification and your pleasure, and to make you feel good and just sit in the background otherwise, basically. If we had ever been considered people who are fragile and delicate and also feminine, fainting flowers who would possibly wilt under the sun, we would have been also sipping lemonade. You know? Like the white women who were like, I want to work. How come I don't get to work? And it's like, I'm sorry, honey, but we were working the fucking fields. That's like not a problem for me. Like, I actually don't care if you don't get to work. That's where I've arrived at this point. It's just like, what are actual women's issues, and do I even have those? You know, when whiter women say, don't treat me like a princess, I'm like, can you explain to me on what planet Afro-Latinas are ever a princess or treated as such ever? So like, sweetie, like, sit down. Like, I actually don't care. That's like, you're complaining about being treated like a delicate, fragile creature, and like, I could really care less at this point. Like, that's privilege. It means you're lucky. It means you're considered a valuable human being. Even when we talk about the concept of a damsel in distress and how that speak is sexist, I'm like, so people consider you valuable enough to save you? Good for you. Like, you're lucky. If the concept of a damsel in distress existed for black women, would slavery have even happened? Because we have been in distress for 600 fucking years. In Latin America, and in the United States, and everywhere the fuck else, pretty much. And nobody cares. There's nobody coming to save us. There are no cavalries. There are no white knights. You know? So, I don't know. As an Afro-Latina, like, it's taboo to even question all of these things because supposedly we're all one and we're united or whatever, but like, we're not. We're really not all one. We're not united. We're not all treated the same. And yeah, even when being in my position has made me have to question everything. Even when we think about like books as the source of major knowledge, I'm like, I'm 35 years old. I've yet to read any books about anybody remotely like myself. They're just not there. We don't have the access usually. That's something that's happening now. Us having the access to even learn how to publish a book, right? In a way that we are able to actually publish in that way, to get access to even do those things. So when you tell me to like just read a book for knowledge, I'm like, so I'm just going to continue not knowing anything about myself. And this is why our oral histories matter, because we can't trust the actual structures and the books and the knowledge sources. However, you guys have like access to JSTOR and that kind of stuff. Please make use of it while you can. I don't have access to that. Most people don't. But because you do, like, punch in all kinds of things. Like, honestly, I have like academic friends who send me stuff about Afro-Latinidad because you guys have more access to my history than I do. Because that is the social position that I'm in, basically. It's easier for you guys to look that up than it is for me. So yeah, it's kind of like being on the peripheral of everything. The only solace that I found is actually other Black girls from around the world. That was when I really started putting things together. When I was like, we have the same issues with hair. People treat us like this everywhere. And yeah, I've been able to count more on other Black people who are not Latin Americans, simply because we understand what we're going through, than with actual Latin Americans. And that's sad, because where am I actually from? I can count on non-Latino people who are Black more than I can on my own nation, in my own like region in general. So yeah, what would it look like if you turned on Univision and there were Black women being loved, dark-skinned Black women being loved? If you saw trans girls as human, Black trans girls as human beings who are also worthy of love on there, people who were disabled who were worthy of love, indigenous families, not as La India Maria, who was like this caricature of being like ignorant and stupid and yada yada, but like as actual, fully realized humans. It's 2018 and that sounds like impossible still to this day. And I don't mean to focus on media like media is everything, but media is a reflection of where people's minds is at, unfortunately. And that is where Latin America still is. Like, at this point, still the only place that you're going to see Afro-Latinas is like on social media or something, because you're not going to see us anywhere else. So now there's like, people think it's like a trend, or like we just popped up like 2 years ago or something like that, even though we've been here for 600 years. We built Latin America. You guys wouldn't have none of y'all's food or freaking food, music or traditions or any of your shit without us, but like we just popped up 2 years ago because that is when we were able to be visible. Like somebody like me, the only reason I'm here today is because social media is like open and free and nobody can gatekeep me out of it. Because trust me, if there was gatekeeping, I would not be here either, because they would have kept the fuck out of me. So what happens on social media is people try to gatekeep in other ways. I've gotten over 3,000 hate mail. I've gotten doxxed, which means people have released like my address where I work, pictures of my child, my husband, just like all kinds of like really horrible things to try to drive me out and basically invisibilize me again. You know, it's like basically some people's conception of the universe is so disturbed by me just existing and talking about what my life is that they need for me to just fucking stop existing so they can feel better again. And it's like, you guys see like maybe one Afro-Latina every 10 years or something, and you cannot handle it, and you want me to just go away already and be invisible again. And that's kind of what I face every day. At this point, I just stay online and on social media out of spite. You know what I'm saying? Just like, I'm not going to let y'all win. I'm not going to make myself invisible again, just so you can feel better when there's so few of us out here to begin with. And I guess I would also like to point out that there's like colorism everywhere, and that includes Latin America. So that means that I occupy a position as like a light-skinned mixed Black girl, and that's not the same position that darker skinned, less ambiguous Black girls are in. Like, I don't face the same treatment or social position that they do, but the difference between Latin America and the United States is, in the US, you're gonna see representation for Black people, and there's going to be a bias towards lighter skinned Black women, but you're at least going to still see Black people. Whereas in Latin America, you're gonna turn on the TV and you're not gonna catch a light skinned Black girl nowhere, because that's still too Black. You're just not gonna catch no Black girls, period. There's just not gonna be there. So context is different. You know, like I grew up in Latin America as like the ugly one, because it was in comparison to all these non-Black Latinas, and Black in Latin America is seen as ugly. Unless it's about your butt, then that's great. You can have a big butt. You know, we don't want blackness beyond that. We don't want you to have your hair to be too curly. You can't be having a broad flat nose. Your skin can't be too dark. We prefer you have blue eyes. Thank you very much. You know, there's a lot of things that we haven't examined in Latin America as far as like beauty standards in general. Because beauty is power. It's not just beauty standards. If you're considered pretty, you're also considered more of a human, and you're allotted more resources. And pretty goes along with white in Latin America. That's why, like, you know, if anybody in our family comes out with like green eyes, it's like a big fucking deal or some shit. It's like, oh my god. And don't let you be blonde or some shit like that, you know. The güeritos are like everything or whatever. And same, if you're like born a black child, then it's like, we're not that enthusiastic anymore. When I was born, my family was disappointed. They were like, we thought you were born in the US, so you would be like whiter or something like that, but you came out black. That kind of sucks. You look regular. You know? It was like, yeah. So yeah, Latin Americans have a lot to grapple with in that sense. Because mostly the Latin American beauty ideal is like somebody who appears to be vaguely mixed down the line, but is still whitish. Still has straight hair. They still have to have a straight nose. They still have to have like, I mean, you can't necessarily have too much of indigenous features either. You know, it's not just like the anti-blackness, but it's hierarchical. So it's like, you know, there's indigenous people who are treated badly, but then still at the bottom is like the worst thing you can still be is a black person, basically. And Latin Americans associate blackness with the same ugly things that people do in the United States. With ugliness, with criminality, with stupidity, yada yada, with being a whore, with being whatever, you know? That's kind of just our lot in life, whether or not we like it. Because I sure don't like it, but like I'm here. A lot of times when I talk about this stuff, like I actually had a girl at one of the talks, a non-black Mexican girl, start crying because she felt like I was attacking her because I was talking about anti-blackness in Latin America. And I'm just like, sweetie, I don't know you. Like, whether or not I know you, like, this is still what it is. Like, this is nothing personal. Just like it's not personal, like, if I'm a light-skinned black girl and I have privilege over dark-skinned black girls, I didn't choose that, but that shit is what it is. And you have to fucking accept that and basically grapple with what the fuck that means and know your fucking place. And it's the same with non-black Latin Americans. Like, there's gonna be people who are lighter or darker than you, who are gonna have nappier or straighter hair than you, and it's like all of that shit matters. Unfortunately, racism is petty as fuck. You're really gonna be treated different and be denied jobs because your fucking nose shape wasn't right. Because your hair came out a little bit too curly or some shit. It's petty as fuck. And it's just like, is it cute? Is it nice? Is it rational? It's none of those things, but it still is what the fuck it is. And like that's a legacy that was left over from colonialism, obviously. It's not like something that we just learned today. There's a lot of things that were left over from colonialism. I mean, even when we think about gender roles in Latin America and like the machismo, we like to think about it as if like that's biological and nature or some shit like that. And it's not. Like, that was violently imposed by colonizers. The reason why Latin American women are now like domestic slaves practically is because they were literally domestic slaves. Spaniard colonizers came and they made like native women and black women literally their domestic slave wives. It was forced. If you didn't do it, you might die. On my island, basically, like when we talk about feminism, we don't really talk about like, what was it like pre-1492 in the Americas? And on my island specifically, we had gender equality already. Colonization flung us into the Dark Ages. It was the opposite. So like, women were chieftains. We were caciques already. There was this one cacique called Ana Caona, who was also a rebel against the Spaniards. So what they did, Now, before they arrived, Anacaona was not just a chief, she was also a songwriter and a poet, and celebrated for it. Now, this is pre-1492, okay? She had her life together. This woman had it all, okay? All right. Colonizers come, and you know what they offered her? Because she was like rebelling. They were like, so, you can be a domestic slave wife for one of these Spaniards, or you can die at the stake. She chose death. Okay, because that was not her normal. So when we think about those things, it's like there are a lot of things that are not ours to keep. It's not our normal either, even if it seems like it is. And that's specifically the history of my island, but I know that there were other indigenous structures elsewhere that were not patriarchal like that either. There are still polyandrous indigenous communities in the Americas. Polyandry means that you have several husbands to one wife. So even when we talk about the biology and patriarchy, it's men's job to spread their seed. You just have to stay home while they do it. It's like, meanwhile, I have a Kenyan friend in Africa who has 11 husbands. Okay, she's the matriarch. She runs everything. They work and do our housework for her. We have polyandrous communities here in the Americas still. So is that really biology? Is that nature? Is that even ours to keep? It's not. A lot of this stuff isn't ours to keep. The anti-blackness is not ours to keep. The machismo is not ours to keep. The homophobia is not ours to keep. Indigenous communities in the Americas, like, they acknowledge more than 3 genders so much of the time. So all of that stuff about binary, only man, only women, only hetero, only cissex, or whatever, it's just like, that's not ours to keep either. Like, those are all things that were violently imposed by colonizers, and like, we don't actually have to keep abiding by that. Like, and some people think that they're gonna lose their Latin American culture if they lose those things, but like, this is what I'm getting at is, do you really need that to have a culture? Do you need that to have tradition? Do you need that to be whole? You fucking don't. It's like an unhealthy, unnatural attachment just because that's just the only way that we've known how to live this whole time. So yeah. I guess I would leave you with what things do you think have to change and have to happen for you to actually crack open people en español en Univision and go to school and there actually be an inclusion of like Black, trans, Latina women through history, Black women through history from Latin America? What has to happen? Why are we not there yet? What is the Latin American structure actually looking like, and how does that connect to the United States structure? You know? I mean, the whole reason that we have people like, say, Zimmerman, George Zimmerman, who killed Trayvon. Some Latin Americans try to attribute his anti-Blackness to being in the U.S., and I'm just like, sweetie, he brought that from Latin America. Y'all are anti-Black as fuck over there. He came here, and that shit, like, connected together like fucking Megatron. It was like, you hate Black people, I hate Black people. That's great. And it's like, now he's like super supported by like all these people, like white supremacists waving Confederate flags. He's like signing packets of Skittles because Trayvon had a packet of Skittles in his fucking pocket. He's like a celebrity to white supremacists. And this guy is, he might have a white name or whatever, but he doesn't even look that white. Like, he may be light skinned, but he's obviously a mestizo. Apparently his mother is also of Afro descent or something like that. But the point is, it don't even matter because at that point, he became their white boy anyway. Because anti-Blackness makes you, it basically allows you to ingratiate yourself with white supremacists, even if you're a person of color. And it's like a lot of people of color fall into that in general. We can't blame all of white supremacy or anti-blackness rather, because those are two separate things. Not for nothing, anti-blackness and white supremacy are not necessarily the same thing. So everything is not because of colonization, by the way. Because like I said, Arabs in the Middle East started the black slave trade. Those were non-black people. They weren't influenced by white colonizers. And when we look at like the East, the Eastern Hemisphere, we'll see a lot of colorism. That is not necessarily because of colonialism. A lot of time it was because of class. But what that ends up meaning is if lighter is better, that means black is at the bottom anyway. So that's also anti-black as fuck. And it's not necessarily because of white supremacy. You know? It's just like things that we all have to deal with, pretty much. So yeah. What would it actually look like if everyone understood Latin America as a place that is full of black people and that black people have actually built that shit from the ground up along with everybody else and that everybody rides on our shit all the time? What things have to happen for me to be a fully human, not just like among Latin American people, but also everywhere else. It's to the point where, you know, people will talk about the sexism in Latin American TV, and when I'm like, hi, are you going to mention that there's no black women ever? And they're like, I meant regular Latinas. You're a subtopic for later. Sorry. You know, and it's just like, what things have to happen for that to change. For me to not be a subtopic for later when there's like literally millions of us here. I think that's what was super affirming for me in Colombia. It was just that there were so many Spanish-speaking black people, and they were really proud of being black, which is something that I don't experience in my own country. But at the same time, they're really marginalized. You know, what things have to happen for, like, say, black people in Colombia who are over 10% of the population, which is very comparable to the U.S. actually, in terms of percentage. There's like 13% black people here, something like that. That's more or less what Colombia is like. But the black towns, they don't get any of the social services from the government. They purposely leave the roads undone so people have trouble getting in and out. They don't send any of the trash pickup. They don't even recognize a lot of the black communities as human to this day. They just don't recognize them, period. And that is a thing that happens pretty much all through Latin America. And as far as just to drive the point home of what it is to be black in Latin America and experiencing racism over there too, is just that black is always seen as not belonging to Latin America, even if you guys use all our shit. So that means that black Mexicans were being deported to Haiti under the assumption that they're not from there. In my country, Haitians are being deported because they're black. In the rest of Latin America, all I hear is the black people from there being assumed to be foreign. And then people treat them bad because they're like, well, you're not from here, so you can't complain. Or something, you know? So, yeah. That's all I'll leave you with. What has to happen for there to be a black trans Latina on Univision as the love interest? And I'm just gonna censor that because me as a light-skinned cis black girl, that's one thing, but that is basically the level that I want us to get at, to where black trans girls are people. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I know some folks have class, so if you do have class, please try and go as quietly as possible. But I'm opening up the floor, it sounds weird, to questions, and I'm going to give the transitions a couple of minutes. But does anyone have questions? Can I give everyone like 1 minute to like get their lives together, and then we'll get going. She's first in the. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Hi. So I'm Caribbean, but I'm not Latino. But the kind of racial dynamics in the Caribbean that's like was more like English colonies is different. And I guess like if you're Caribbean, like for example, my mom's from Grenada, and it's like you can say like you're black, and when you think of like countries like Jamaica, Trinidad, it's like you automatically think of black. But then when you think of like places like DR or Puerto Rico, you don't. Well, I do because I know, but a lot of people don't. So like, why do you think that that happened, and why do you think that I guess like the people in the Spanish colonies tend to be more mixed, whereas in the English colonies there wasn't that kind of mixing, so we don't have those same dynamics. Why do you think that happened?
Well, the histories are different. First, we're talking about like say countries like Jamaica, where like there are white people, but that's mostly freed slaves and migrants who came from other islands. Whereas in Latin America, it was like the colonizers stayed. And they didn't just stay. Like I said, they had the blanqueamiento processes where they literally would bring in purposely people from white countries to whiten the population. So that happened. And also, in terms of the Dominican Republic, it's also like a play of words that has been done according to what is convenient. Like, there's this poem from like the 1800s from DR that says like something like, yesterday I was French, or like, before yesterday I was French, like before yesterday I was Ethiopian, then I was French, today I'm English, what am I going to be tomorrow? And what's happened with the Dominican Republic is people manipulating what our national identity is as far as race from the outside according to what is convenient for the colonizers. Initially, what was convenient was for us to not acknowledge our blackness whatsoever, for us to think that we were white because that would make their jobs easier. Then they tried to make us look like a black colony, and then the U.S. Saw us. When the Trujillo stuff happened, people blamed Trujillo, but he was actually backed and funded by the U.S. government fully. And they encouraged him to make these brochures with a bunch of the few white Dominicanas that they found, so they could shop it to like moneyed Americans, Canadians, Europeans, or whatever who would come invest, because they wouldn't have come to invest if they thought that it was a black country, basically. So now after they did that, then they're like, how come you niggas don't think you're black? And it's just like, you guys put like 600 years of work into making us feel all kind of ways about being black, all kind of horrible ways about being black, basically, and manipulating that. And now, all of a sudden, you can't just suddenly expect it to like shift back to black. And I mean, it's still happening because people have autonomy and there is a black movement, but it's like defanged. The government does not let those kind of things pass by. The DR is still majority black, and like while in Colombia, I talked to a woman who does like activism in those realms, and she says that in Panama, the Ministry of Culture for DR went, and in the room, she stood up and was like, I just want to say we don't have any black people in the Dominican Republic. And this is like last year. The DR is like 90% black, by the way. Okay. So like, it's literally like a government sanctioned thing to be anti-black because it's not convenient to them, to how they feel, and it's not convenient to their money and whatever the fuck. So apparently self-hate fucking pays. Being anti-black pays, But yeah, that's what happened with Latin America, honestly. The colonizers stayed. Kind of like how the US happened, where like they stayed basically. And that's why like I have a lot of issues when Latin Americans try to like wash themselves of responsibility for being hierarchical in Latin America, because it's like the colonizers are still there and their kids are still there and everybody else trying to still like look up to them and be like them. Like that hasn't changed basically. It's just like a difference in history, Other people had like a chance to be proud and black. Like places like DR didn't. That was always suppressed, pretty much. And it's still being suppressed. You know, just like I said now. Like there's a black movement, and meanwhile at the same time the government is like, we're not black. You know?
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Clinton. I'm Nigerian, so I'm a foreigner, but I kind of felt the same things you felt. When did you decide to like know yourself? Because like I feel like all of the things you've experienced and like our learning are like tied to that.
I feel like it wasn't a decision. I kind of didn't have a choice eventually. I know that there was always pushback when I tried before, but being around black women was like my defining moment. Being around other non-Latina black women who was like, when I was like unsure of myself, and I was like, I don't know what to call myself because like I was raised Dominican to think that I don't have a race, which is ridiculous. I do. I'm treated as such. Like I can be in denial about that all the time, but it still is, right? And I was like, I know that both my parents are nappy-headed. I know I'm nappy-headed. And these black girls were like, girl, shut the fuck up, you're black. And I swear, like, I needed that shit. I needed just somebody to tell me to shut the fuck up. And to just acknowledge who the fuck I am. To be honest. And like from there on, it's just been like examining my life and the things that have happened to me, and like my experiences just tie into all of that. And I mean, I keep learning every day, but through my 20s, I learned a lot about like, once I had a baby, it was like, then I was like facing a lower social bracket because I learned that black women who have babies are considered like a faux pas because it's like you're bringing another undesirable into the world. I was like, even that made me question like motherhood, and it's like this concept of this beautiful protected motherhood that's so revered and honored didn't fucking apply to me because I was a black person with a big belly. It was like people looked at me the way that you look at like a crackhead on the street who's pregnant, just like, wow, what an irresponsible fucking person or something. It's like you don't know anybody's life, first of all. Right. And second, that's just really the way that people look at you when you're a black woman, basically. So there's a lot of things that I just haven't been able to escape. I mean, my inbox is full of people calling me all kind of N-words and yard apes and whatever the fuck. So, I mean, I don't escape that I'm black. I can deny it, but it's still there. You know? It wasn't a choice, really. It was like me really having to sit there and grapple with all the shit that's happening to me.
Thank you.
So this is a bit of, my name is Grace, by the way. This is a bit of like a pop culture reference or whatever, but so I started watching Love and Hip Hop Miami. And so, and that's like the only Love and Hip Hop I watched, and it was only because I saw an article about Amara. And so, with the whole situation, you know, like what happened? Yeah, so the whole situation with that, where Amara was like, I'm black, because obviously she's black, and she's Dominican. And then, what's his name? Young Hollywood, who's also Dominican, but he's like, I mean, I can't even call him white
Puerto Rican, but
Puerto Rican.
Yeah, he's white.
that dude is very white passing. I mean, in Latin America, he functions as a white person.
Okay. And so, and he was
He
like,
passed for Italian if you don't say he's like, let's be real. There's a reason Italians have been playing Latinos for so long.
a big fact. And so with his whole spiel, he started like saying like, oh, Afro Latina was that, Nutella Queen, all these different things that he started saying to her. But then when she talked, I'm just saying this for the sake of like people who might not watch the show. But then when she went to her friends, one of her friends was Haitian, and then the other one, Veronica, is also Dominican. She's like very white passing, and then she also dyed her hair blonde. So then there's that. And so at first Veronica was like, oh, whatever, like I get, like I'm so sad that you feel this way. But then after a while, her and Young Hollywood pretty much teamed up and were bashing on Amara. and even went to the point where she tried to pull Amada's hair and was like, it's a wig, it's a wig. You're just like, pretty much was just like, you're in blackface, like you can't really be black. But then on top of that, Veronica had this whole issue where she kept on saying the N-word in her music, and obviously Veronica's white, but she was like, I don't have to explain that my grandmother is black for everybody to finally get me to let me say the N-word. And she was like, and so
they're only ever black for comedians.
Exactly. Basically. And so at the very end, like during the reunion, she had said like, oh, like I'm black. And everybody in the room was like, but they can't tell somebody like you're not black.
You can, bitch, you're not black.
Okay.
You gotta know your fucking place. Look.
So my Latin Caribbean distinction.
What is the distinction? The Latin Caribbean is full of Afrodescendientes who don't necessarily look black. That's a normal thing. People are talking about enero detrás de la oreja, y tu abuela donde está, whatever, where's your grandma, yada yada yada. Okay, the problem with that is the focus on somebody in your past, like blackness is a relic. There's a shit ton of black people who are right here, right now, and y'all are not fucking focusing on that shit whatsoever, just so you can see the N-word when you look white. You're not doing shit to help the plight of black people. You're not acknowledging your place whatsoever. But you want to say the N-word though? So there's like this whole thing where people think it's trendy now to be the Afro-Latina. And it was like, well, I'm Afro-Latina. It's like because, oh, well, I have curly hair. And it's like, okay. And the other thing is like, even if your dad is black, if you have like a whole ass black parent, if your ass didn't come out looking black, people are not going to treat you black. You have to just fucking acknowledge that shit. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't take away your Afro-descendants, but it does take away you being black, like that, as in living the black experience. And it's like, people are also having problems with that because it's a way for them to excuse themselves and to not have to acknowledge their place and to not have to change anything. Because it's like, so what the fuck does that even mean? Like, to me, that doesn't mean anything. Because if I look on Univision, I could bet that everybody on there probably has like 1% black or some shit like that. But what the fuck do I care? It's still colorist. I do not care that you all have Afro-descendants if you're only looking for white people to represent. So now every list of the Afro-Latinos would be like 25 Afro-Latinos to look for and only 4 of them look black. So you notice how whitewashed blackness too, basically? I'm just like, okay, so now you guys are the only ones represented when you're white Latinos, basically. And now when it comes to black stuff, you're going to put yourself in there too? When it was so that black people who aren't represented could finally be fucking represented, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, you just got to know your place. Nobody's erasing your great grandma or some shit like that. Like, okay, cool. But like, sit the fuck down and know your place about it, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not your life. Nobody treats you like a black person. And it's like, you just gotta grapple with that shit. People need to know their lane. It's okay to know your lane. It doesn't take anything from you to know your fucking lane. You know? Like, you know?
Yeah.
And Veronica's lane is not a black one. She's a white Latina. That's another one where if she didn't speak Spanish, you would be confused as to whether or not she is. And it's like, for me, that's what happens to me. Like, Latinos speak Spanish to my face and say anti-black shit about me to my face in Spanish, swearing that I don't understand them because to them I'm too black to be Latina, basically. Even though I'm a light-skinned mixed black girl, that's still too black, basically. So yeah, just know your fucking place. And I feel like that's coming up a lot, mostly because people think that it's trendy, and it's like, I don't get to take the black on and off as a trend. And I don't have to explain to nobody. Everybody knows I'm napping at it. You know what I'm saying? Everybody knows that from jump. I don't gotta explain a great grandma. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not the same thing. And yeah, like, recently, Miss Afrodescendiente Colombia, guess what color she is? White blonde with blue eyes. Okay. Now, mind you, that's who wins all the other beauty pageants. Especially in Latin America, they only pick white girls. But then for the Miss Afrodescendiente, they also picked the white girl. And then when people complain, they were like, well, it's racist to not let them win. And it's just like, So you're just gonna keep censoring white people in absolutely fucking everything, including in blackness. And if anybody tells you anything that you complain about you being oppressed, that doesn't even exist. I don't listen to non-black anybody talk about I'm oppressing them just because I'm talking about my plight and how we deserve representation. Because when I take y'all on slave ships, when I deny y'all jobs, when I have all the media and don't include y'all, then you can fucking talk to me about something. You can't talk about where's the Latino Black Panther. I'm like, there's a whole ass Latin American industry with thousands of films that have been produced and none of them have any black people in them, even though every country has black people. So don't you tell me a motherfucking word about a Black Panther because you niggas don't include nobody anyway. Like, get your shit together first. Y'all have every motherfucking Latin American movie ever without Afro-Latinos. So you can fucking deal with one black fucking movie. Basically, people are anti-black as fuck. They want everything, literally, and give nothing. Every time people come to me, they get with, I need to do this and I need to do that. I'm just like, when you show me what the fuck you do for Afro-Latinas, you show me a bunch of receipts, I will review them, and then I will make up my motherfucking mind as to whether or not I'm going to do some shit for you. Do not expect things from black people that you never fucking did. It's so simple. You know what I'm saying? And like, that's the issue with all of that stuff. It's just like people are not thinking at all about what the fuck their place is. They don't bother with it. It's too comfortable. You know?
Hi, my name is Trisha. I'm also Afro-Latina. So, whoop whoop, the pride. My question's a little similar, so I don't want to hash this. I love the conversation, but I want to make sure we're not confident of time. But I think my question's more rooted in Latinos who are black trespassing. Because I found like with my Latino family, like they're obviously like Spaniards. Like mi abuelita had red hair and freckles, and as like we were African, they're obviously like very white Latinos. And so I found that, as of course, I'm obviously not those white Latinos growing up. Like I got a lot of slack for being black and having a black mom and a black family. And now I find that a lot of Latinos now, it's not necessarily that they hate blackness in the same sense, but they want to be black so bad. And they want to constantly use black culture as like something to aspire to. And so it's still rooted in, again, a sense that black people are something to be commodified. But I don't know if you had any strategies or things that you've done to understand where people can stop saying, I stutter a lot. But if you had any strategies that you've done or ways that you've learned to help people understand that the black experience is specifically rooted because of like blackness and not because of the other parts that intersect with it. And so when people can't try to say, well, I've had a similar experience to that, so then I can say this and that, or I'm black because I've experienced that. It's like, no, you're not black.
That's just anti-blackness. Because they don't do that with nothing else. Okay? You can't be like, well, I share some, you don't hear nobody being like, well, I share some issues with whoever, so I'm Hawaiian now. I'm Asian now. I'm this, I'm that. You don't do that. You know that that's not your fucking place. You know what I'm saying? But blackness is seen as like without ownership, without a place. It's everybody's. It's for everyone's taking. Everyone can just do whatever the fuck they want with it and pick it up and like tear it up and like just do whatever the fuck they can or want, you know? And that's just plain old anti-blackness. You may not think that they hate black people, that's still a form of it though, honestly. I would liken it to there was this Maori girl who did choreography for Justin Bieber's video, Sorry or whatever, which is like a very soca West Indian track. It was written by a West Indian. That's like super black ass music, but by a white boy. So he got this choreographer who's Maori. She's like native of New Zealand or whatever. And that girl pretty much only put non-black women. And the choreography was all Jamaican dance hall type stuff. All by non-black women of color. Choreographed by non-black women of color. So when that came out, she came out saying that, you know, Dance is for everyone, music is universal, yada yada. But the only reason she thought that is because she's anti-black, and for her, blackness does not have owners. We don't get to have any authority over our things. Now, if you were to tell that girl that everybody can do a haka or hula, she would be like, bitch, no, you can't, because you're not from my fucking culture. However, because it was black, it was okay to do that shit. And basically, non-black people of color are absolutely guilty of that shit all the motherfucking time. They will complain about being appropriated by everybody else. They have no motherfucking issues treading all over fucking black stuff and putting it on like a costume, because it's suddenly everyone's. It's just pop. It doesn't have an owner. And it's like all of that shit has an owner, and they're all black people. It's just that you don't give a fuck about black people. That's the only difference. So it's like, that's the only way that I can explain that. It's just that it's still fucking anti-black. It's like, if you're not the one living it, you just mind your fucking lane. It's so simple, you know? It's okay to be in your lane. Your lane is good, you know? Like, people be asking me stuff that's not in my lane, and I just tell them outright. Like, people be asking me, like, oh, what about this word chingona or whatever? Who can, like, use it? I'm like, I'm Dominican from the East Coast. We don't even use that word. So that's not my lane whatsoever to even give you a half of an opinion. You need to ask people who are from that context, because that's who can tell you who can and cannot take that on. You know what I'm saying? Your lane. Mind your fucking lane. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. More questions?
Hello, I'm Alicia. My question is like basically about the use of language in terms like negra or like morena, and like how they're supposed to be approaching, but then they still kind of like walk along this like anti-blackness line. So I just was wondering like how you felt about that.
I think that everybody's feelings about that need to be respected individually, because a lot of people feel different ways about it. Like, you know, there was a discussion about like mi negra or whatever, and it's like some people don't want to be called that no more because they've been owned. They don't want to be called my black. I'm not yours. You don't own me no more. And by the way, non-black Latinos also own slaves. It wasn't just the white ones. You know, like, but some people are going to take that as like a sign of love, and it also depends on context and who's saying it to you. Kind of like the N-word. It's like, what is the context? You know, context fucking matters. Who's saying it? When? How? So that really depends. My whole thing is just respect when people tell you that they're not comfortable with something. You know, like as soon as somebody said like, I'm not comfortable with you saying mi negra, there was immediately a white Latina under it like, what do you mean no? I'm gonna keep doing it. And it's just like, what is y'all's problem with respecting black women's boundaries, yo? If black women say no, it means no, and that's it. It's not gonna kill you to not say that to them. You can find other ways to refer to them or whatever. Like, for example, like a lot of people have been reappropriating the word prieta. For me, I haven't done that yet because it still hurts. Other people, if they're comfortable with that, that's cool. But like, that's gonna be an individual thing. Anytime people said prieta to me, it was like with bitterness in their mouth. And it's like, I don't fucking like it still. I'm not sure I'm gonna use it, you know? But if other people do, then that's cool. Just basically respect what people tell you about like what they are comfortable with. Some people are okay with morena, they're okay with negra. I call myself negra all the time, that's fine. I don't necessarily use morena, but that works too in some contexts. Like in DR, morena means black too, you know? So it's just gonna be really individual. You just gotta respect what everybody feels about certain things, pretty much. And that's not hard. You can just act like it is. Because you'll know when people are not comfortable with it, because they'll just tell you, and that's it. You know? Just tread lightly and know to stop when people tell you to stop. It sounds easy, but apparently it's not. Because like I said, people be arguing about it, like, no, that's fine. It's loving, and I'm going to keep doing it to you. Like, if I told you no, then it's not loving. And if you're disrespecting and violating my fucking boundaries, you absolutely don't love me. You know, like, please don't call it that. You know, I don't know. That's how I feel about that, basically.
It's something that was kind of hard for me growing up, although I didn't really realize it until like ninth grade, like high school, was like when we would learn about like Black history, it would mostly be within like the North American context. And you know, we would learn about like Martin Luther King, like we wouldn't even learn about like Malcolm X, like we would just learn about like the set people that they chose for us to learn about. And like on top of that, I went to schools where it was like mostly white kids and white teachers, so like that was that on top of that. But then when I got to high school, I started to realize like, oh my God, like you don't even learn all about Black American history, and then let alone about my own history, like Caribbean history, and even less about like Afro-Latino history. And like within the past 2 years, that really started to upset me, and I really started to notice it more. So I just was wondering, like, what would you say, like, how could we change that, or do you think that could possibly change in the future?
I mean, that's not necessarily a hard thing to do, but it is. Mostly because, like, who sets up curriculums? You know, what social position are they in usually? Are they even accessible for you to even be, like, giving them suggestions about these curriculums? It's just, like, the only ways that we found is by basically doing alternate methods of education, and like that's how the whole social media stuff came about. And it's because like where we can't access changes to like a curriculum, we can still access this sort of platform where it's free and anybody can have it and anybody can follow, and you can just use it to educate people on things. As somebody who's on the peripheral all the time, basically, that's how I go about it. And just going through my day-to-day, just like talking to people about things, and taking the time to do that. But also, I've taken a lot of time to do research on my own, even if it was just on Google, even if it was just me going to the library or whatever. So I'm big on just people taking that into their own hands in the meantime, because I feel like changes on that level to curriculums pretty much globally, because it's a global fucking issue, that's going to be really hard to do. That's going to take a lot of time. And there are people working on that within the structures, but obviously who runs everything, it's not people like us. So they're not interested in like our history, pretty much. And even when it's in our countries, like say in the Dominican Republic, that's a majority Black country, like that's not part of the curriculum either. And it's because the government is like totally against even acknowledging that, And again, what people have done is they've kind of taken to the streets. Like literally, I have a friend who stands on the corner teaching people about how to take care of their natural hair. And like about Black pride or whatever the fuck. And it's just like, those are the methods and routes that we end up having to take. Just alternative methods, because we don't have access to like the structure stuff. All of those things work, to be honest. Standing on the corner, stopping people like, hey, let me tell you how to take care of, like, I can show you how to do this, and, this is why it's important. And this is the history of like why you even have nappy hair and like all this other stuff. Like, we have to take it into our own hands, basically. It's been the only way until now.
Thank you.
So we're running low on time, so maybe one more. If anyone has any burning question. Oh, Enrique, chill. All right, so if there's no last like heartfelt question, I'd like to give another round of applause for Sylvia.